Hey guys, it's Will. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, if you are unsubscribed, then you could subscribe. That would be much appreciated, and welcome. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, I hope you're doing well today. So what are we talking about today? We are talking about my 5 favorite movies of 1984. And why are we talking about that? I was born in 1983. I turned 40 in 2023, and I decided it would be really fun to do my 5 favorite movies from every year that I've been alive. And I wanted to do it in such a way so that it would represent the whole spectrum of my taste across my whole life. And so 1984 was really hard. I had 11 movies on the short list. Some of the movies I left off are actually like all-time favorites of mine that I would say right now I like more than movies I put on the list, but I wanted to represent everything from 1984 that has been like very important to me throughout the course of my life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you 5, 4, and 3, and then I'm going to tell you everything I left off the list, and then we'll get to 2 and 1. And the order of 2 and 1 was really hard, and I might actually change the order live as I do the list because it's almost impossible for me to decide which one. And I'll talk about it when I get there. So at number 5 on my list of my favorite movies in 1984, if you watch my Hong Kong cinema channel, if you watch this channel, you will know I like to cheat on lists, and I cheated and I put 2 movies at number 5, but there's a reason I did it. It's the slasher special, Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, the final chapter. So here, let me break this down for you. Nightmare on Elm Street is an absolutely classic slasher film. It's a classic 80s film. It's a classic horror film. It's a really fantastic movie. I first saw this movie probably like 10 or 12 years ago, and I really liked it, but I never saw any of the Nightmare movie or any of the other Nightmare movies. And then last year, a very good friend of mine, Mike, who is the editor for this channel, so shout out to Mike, and the silent partner and all the social media stuff that I do, and none of this stuff would exist without Mike, so a huge shout out to Mike. Talk to Mike in the comments. Mike gave me a Blu-ray set of all the Nightmare movies. And so I rewatched the first one, and then I saw for the first time the whole rest of the series, and I loved it. I loved those movies. Like, they blew me away. I can't believe I didn't see them when I was younger, because they were really big movies, like in the late 80s, early 90s. Like when I first started getting really into movies, going to the video store a lot, like I would see those movies all the time. But the first one, I had a Freddy Krueger glove as a kid. Like before like I said, I saw the first one, I think it was about 10 or 12 years ago. I didn't see it in the 80s, but I just loved those movies. Now, the Friday the 13th movies, my relationship with those goes all the way back to probably about 1990. I had this babysitter for a couple weeks in the summer one year. I don't remember exactly what year it was. I was probably like 7 or 8. And it was this kid I went to church with who was a lot older than me. And he was like staying home for the summer, and my mom was having trouble like finding him. I don't remember the exact situation, but this kid babysat me, I think, for about a week or so. And he had all these movies on VHS, like hundreds and hundreds of them. We would just hang out at his house and watch movies all day. And he made me, I guess you would say made me, because he was babysitting me and I couldn't go anywhere. He made me watch Halloween 5 randomly, and Nightmare on Elm Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, which is still one of my favorite Jason movies. It's probably my favorite Jason movie. I love that movie. That was the beginning of my relationship with the Friday the 13th series. So I've been watching those movies for like 30 years. And then I was much older, obviously, when I saw most of the rest of them. I think I saw the first one when I was in high school, and then eventually I ended up seeing all of them. But the final chapter, which is the 4th film in this series, is probably my second favorite, maybe my joint favorite. The thing about Friday the 13th Part 6 is that it's like a satire. It's like a self-aware film that's making fun of slasher films, while it is also itself it's like the RoboCop of slasher films. If I'm picking a Friday the 13th movie that's my favorite, just like straight ahead brutal slasher movie, I'm going to pick Final Chapter. So I love that movie, and I love Nightmare, and I thought, let's just do like a slasher movie double feature special at number 5. At number 4 on my list of my favorite movies in 1984, I have Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This is the only Indiana Jones movie that I owned growing up. We had the VHS of it. My brother and I used to watch it over and over again, and like the horror elements of it, the disgustingness of it, like the ripping out the hearts. When you're like a little kid, right? I mean, I wasn't like a little kid when we first got this movie. I was probably like 7 or 8, but I had seen it before. And like, when you see a movie like this and someone's like ripping out people's hearts and you're a kid, you're like, ooh, I'm not supposed to be watching this. This is really fun. I just like, that movie is just gross. Like, it obviously is tapped into that like gross out practical effects, like makeup, nasty, just like Fangoria horror culture of the 80s. And it's really interesting now as an adult, and as someone who's like been to film school and everything, to like watch this like tentpole 80s family entertainment, huge budget blockbuster that is very clearly taking from kind of like underground horror movie culture. And it's a really good movie. I mean, Steven Spielberg at that time was just like on another planet as a filmmaker. Like his visual design, his blocking, the cinematography in those movies is just mind blowing. But it's also a really fun adventure movie, and it's like this disgusting, gross out sort of horror movie. At number 3 on my list of my favorite movies in 1984, you know, I couldn't not put a Hong Kong film on here. If you know me, I do a whole channel for Hong Kong cinema. One of my favorite Hong Kong movies ever, actually 2 of my favorite Hong Kong movies ever. One of them didn't make the list, which I'm really bummed about. I'll talk about that in a minute. Came out in 1984, and it's Wheels on Meals, directed by Sammo Hung. I feel a sneeze. There it goes. Excuse me. Directed by Sammo Hung and starring Jackie Chan, Yoon Biu, Lola Foreigner is in this film. The Betty Urquidez fight at the end of this movie is very, very famous. I love this movie to death. This is one of my all-time favorite Jackie Chan movies, favorite Sammo Hung movies, favorite action comedies. The comedy in this movie is so, so funny. Like Sammo Hung wearing the Jerry curl wig, and he's like this like gumshoe detective. And there's like a scene where he goes into this bar and he's looking for like clues about the whereabouts of this woman. And every table he sits at, he's like drinking people's wine and beer, and he's like hammered by the time he leaves the bar. It's just like so funny. And I love the characters. I love the relationship between the Jackie Chan and the Yoon Biu character, and the relationship between them and the Lola Foreigner character, and the way that she's kind of like very wily and always like one step ahead of them. And it's just I just love this movie to death. And the fight between Jackie Chan and Betty Urquidez is one of the greatest fights, if not the greatest fight ever put to film. It's just a freaking fantastic movie, and I could not put it on there. So now I'm going to tell you all the movies that it really, really pained me to leave off. And then we will get into the top 2. The first movie that killed me to leave off is Long Arm of the Law. This is a Hong Kong crime thriller that's kind of like a proto-heroic bloodshed film directed by Johnny Mok. It is about these guys from mainland China who are ex-military, who are very poor, who come into Hong Kong to knock over like a diamond, like jewelry store, so that they can get basically what would be enough money for them to go back and live on for the rest of their lives. And it's like a thriller heist movie, but it's really like this very deep examination of these characters and their lives and where they come from, the social situations they find themselves in, the historical situations they're kind of trapped by, and how they kind of fight against that. And it's a really, just really well-made, dark, brutal, kind of harrowing crime drama. And when I say brutal, I don't mean like extremely graphic violence. It's like an emotionally brutal movie, and it's definitely a precursor to the mid to late 80s kind of like John Woo, Ringo Lam style heroic bloodshed film. It's a really fantastic movie, and I really hated leaving it off. 16 Candles. The main reason I didn't put 16 Candles on the list, honestly, is that I prefer Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to sneak one of those on. But it's a really, really fun and classic movie. Beverly Hills Cop was very hard for me to leave off, but I was like, well, I have Wheels on Meals. That's a classic 80s action comedy. But, you know, I mean, as I said in my 1983 video when I talked about Trading Places, I love 80s Eddie Murphy. Karate Kid, that's not a movie that I really watch a lot anymore. I honestly can't even remember the last time I saw that film, but obviously I think like a lot of kids in the 80s, that was like a really big cultural touchstone. And then the last film that was actually really hard for me to leave off, because right now in my present day, I like this more than I think a fair number of other films on this list. And I think it's a more well-made film and a more interesting film. It's The Cotton Club, specifically the Francis Ford Coppola restoration. So a lot of people didn't know that Coppola made a restoration of this film because it wasn't very well publicized that he did it. They just know the theatrical cut, which a lot of people really don't like. The restoration is like 20 or 30 minutes longer, and it is a freaking fantastic movie. It's probably like my 5th favorite Coppola movie, honestly, after like Apocalypse Now, Godfather 1 and 2, Bram Stoker's Dracula. I would put this at number 5 probably. And there were times when I've watched it like 3 or 4 times since it came out, and there are times where I'm like, I might like this more than Dracula. It's this like jazz era movie about it's about the Cotton Club in Harlem. So it examines racial disparities, and it has like a black lead character, and it has a white lead character, and the white guy is like a jazz musician, and the black lead character and his brother are like these dancers and performers at the Cotton Club, and it looks at like Prohibition era New York City and like the gangsters and the violence, and it looks at like early Hollywood. And this movie is kind of like if you take a movie like The Untouchables, of that kind of jazz era type of gangster movie, and say Martin Scorsese directed it instead of Brian De Palma, right? That's kind of what this is. It has that kind of restless, unpredictable energy of a Scorsese movie, but it's that Prohibition era gangster type of movie. And well, Coppola has talked a lot about the influence of music on his filmmaking, and I really see the influence of jazz on like the rhythms and the pacing and the editing in this film, where it has these bursts of energy and violence, and then it has these kind of subdued, beautiful character moments and passages like that, and it's like has elements of a musical in it because there's a lot of performance numbers in the film, but I love this movie. And right now in my present day, I would put this near the top of this list. But like I said, I really wanted to pick movies that represent kind of the full spectrum of my taste over my whole life. And this is a movie where like the restoration of this movie came out maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Like it's very recent. And so that's why I didn't put it on the list. So now we get into the top two, and it's really, really hard for me to pick which one I like more and to number them. So I'm going to go with Terminator at number 2. It feels like painful to say it. Terminator 2 was a movie that I was obsessed with as a kid. I saw it when it first came out on VHS, if I'm not mistaken. I fell in love with it immediately. I watched it over and over again. It's still one of my favorite movies. And then eventually I went back and I saw Terminator. They're very different movies. Terminator is almost kind of like a slasher movie in the way that it's set up, and like the way the characters are arranged and the way the plot plays out. The ambiance of it is incredible. It's just such an amazing premise. I love cyberpunk movies. Like it really is like a 10 out of 10 movie. Like I think it's just as good as Terminator 2. It's just very different, and they have different vibes, and like when you're in different moods, they appeal to you differently. But it's just an incredible movie. And it, like, the whole Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator, like it was such a huge presence throughout so much of my life, but especially my childhood. So there's tons of nostalgia for it. But I mean, it's just a classic and incredible film. And like I said, it was very hard for me to put it at number 2. So now you're thinking, well, Will, what is your number 1 movie of 1984 if you're putting Terminator at number 2? My number 1 movie of 1984, speaking of music and editing films around music and stuff like that, Amadeus, directed by Milos Forman. This is a movie about the life of Mozart. The performance by F. Murray Abraham as Salieri, who's like Mozart's competitor in the film, is what I would argue one of the greatest screen performances of all time. That performance is just transcendently incredible. This film is just really, really stunningly beautiful. The cinematography in this movie is incredible. The set design, the costumes, obviously the music, it's about Mozart, right? The performances, the script. It's one of the most, I think, beautiful and powerful films I've ever seen about art and artists. One of the things I think is really astounding about this film is that it does an amazing job of showing you this really radical divide between kind of the outward personality of the artist and the things they're able to do and conjure through their art. And I think it's a really fascinating examination of that. And you don't often see, like oftentimes when you see movies that are about artists, they really romanticize the artist and they lean into their more romantic tendencies and their more poetic tendencies. And in this film does the exact opposite. It's like Mozart loved drinking, and he was like a womanizer, and he would go to these insane parties, and he had this really crude and crass sense of humor, and people thought he was like nuts, and they didn't like him, and they thought he was really inappropriate, and he was like very brash, and he didn't abide by like the typical kind of social mores of his era. And yet he made some of the most incredible, astoundingly beautiful, poetic, romantic, complex music ever made. And so it's a really fascinating and incredible film. It's just very lavish and beautiful and stunning. And so I put Amadeus at number 1. Those are my 5 favorite movies. 1984. Thanks for watching. My name is Will. I hope you liked this video. I hope you liked the channel. let me know what your movies are in the comments, your top 5 of 1984. I'm trying to point down at the comments. Where's the tip of my pen? There it is. Yeah, and we'll see you next time.